Hello. Today I'm asking the question whether you should be using more wrist action when you're putting, and whether maybe wrist action could save your putting. If you look at the history of putting over the years, in the days of Bobby Jones, one of the best players on the planet, where he basically putted totally out of his wrists, allowed his body to move, we've come to a putting action in the modern game which uses almost no wrists, or at least no conscious wrist action. If you do actually measure the wrist movement using a hack motion device or something similar, then you will actually see there's maybe 3 or 4 degrees of change in the wrist action during a swing, mainly in the extension and flexion of the wrist, the bowing back and bending forward of the wrist. But there's very little, and this can actually go up to maybe 8-9 degrees when they're hitting longer putts. But are they better putters for this? Through the ages, if you go Bobby Jones, then maybe Arnold Palmer, Ben Crenshaw, you do see a general reduction in the wrist action. But Ben Crenshaw, who in my day when I was growing up was probably the best putter on the planet, was using quite a lot of hinge in his backswing, not quite so much extension in the follow-through. And this is something that I have actually found, especially with amateur golfers, is not detrimental to their game. So I'm not really saying you should be going out there and starting to wobble everything around here. What I am saying, however, is holding it stiff is not the answer, especially for people who aren't able to get out there and practice their putting every day. Just think of it logically. If you were to roll a ball, you would use your wrists. Where is the feeling that you are going to develop? Have you more feeling in your hands, or do you have more feeling in your shoulders? I do understand the mechanics of using a shoulder action, getting this triangle of shoulders, arms and hands moving, and the logic being that if the wrist is stiff, the elbows are stiff, and only the movement is coming out of a kind of a pendulum in your shoulders, that's got to be more reliable. But does it make you a better putter? Are people holding more short putts than ever using this method? Maybe, but I doubt it. And at the same time, using that method for long putts, where are you going to get the energy if you block the levers? A lot of long putters, especially amateur putters, are getting lots of body movement involved in order to get enough energy to get the ball to the hole. And especially if you're playing on slow greens, allowing a little bit of flexion and extension in your wrists, bowing back and swinging forward, would not only allow you to get maybe a better feel for it, but it might also allow you to get the ball up there without bending yourself double or changing your axis relative to the golf ball. The big fear, of course, is that we're going to be changing the club face too much, adding loft, detracting loft, rotating the face to the right or the left of the target, and this would cause us to miss putts. But I believe if you concentrate and train your hands to just use 2 axes, so try and get rid of the rotation in your hands, there's going to be rotation simply out of your shoulder action. Even if I keep my wrist stiff, rotating my shoulders to the right opens the face, and rotating to the left closes the face for a right-handed golfer. And I'm not going to get away from that. It is simply the case. When, on the contrary, I stand there and allow my wrist to move correctly, do you think that there's more rotation or less rotation there? In truth, to bend your wrist back, you will also have to bend it down a little bit. To bend it forward, it will also bend up a little bit. This, I think, is one of the reasons that when we swing through, sometimes the club will be a little bit higher off the ground than we'd actually like. But by keeping the wrist down, it will actually stop the bending forward of the wrist, or at least it will decrease it considerably. So by keeping this angle change relatively small, you will be able to control this angle change, using a little bit of hinge to actually accelerate the ball through, but releasing the club head to the target. All modern putters really are pretty heavy devices, and you should be able to feel the putter head releasing through the ball, even if it's only a little. But can you? Or are you so stiff, all you can feel is the tension in your shoulders and arms? So what I want you to do first of all is basically learn how the wrist should be moving by looking at the wrists individually. And you can do a very simple job of this by simply putting with one hand and seeing how you can actually, or whether you can actually hit the hole using the wrists. So without too much movement in your shoulders, just using your wrists, you can see that I'm holding the club in the palm of my hand. So between the thumb, the ball of the thumb and the ball of the heel of the hand. And I'll do that on both hands. So the feeling is, first of all, getting more like my trail hand pointing at the target and the back of my lead hand pointing at the target. And then I'm looking for the wrist to move like that. There is going to be a little bit of change in this direction, but I want to keep that at a minimum to start off with, because as I say, that will actually stop you going into too much extension in the follow through. By doing that then, I'm then first of all going to just allow myself to putt just with the right hand for me and have a feeling that the club is going through, but I'm not allowing the thumb to rotate right or left on the shaft. I don't want it rotating to the right in the backswing or to the left in the downswing. Almost as if somebody were holding my thumb and my wrist was kind of moving backwards and forwards without the thumb going into too much rotation, which obviously is coming out the lower arm. But really the proof's in the pudding, so to speak. And if you can hole a putt with just one hand, then you're actually going to find you'll be able to hole it with two hands as well, as long as, of course, you give it enough force to actually get to the hole. It's a similar kind of thing with the lead hand. The lead hand opening and releasing the club head through the ball. You will find when you're practicing this with your lead hand that you will get probably more extension than you would want in a modern putt. However, you should be able to get it so far so that, again, if you hit it hard enough, you'll actually be able to not only get it to the hole, but get it into the hole with just this one-handed putting. What that tells you, if you are allowing the wrist to move backwards and forwards, is that your wrists are moving in a way which is delivering the club face square to the target at impact. And by practicing, say, meter and a half putts, 3 to 6 foot putts, only a degree open or closing of the club face will cause you to lip out and hit the ball to the right or left of the target. So you can be pretty confident, simply because of what the ball's doing, whether or not you have actually delivered the club face square. When obviously you then combine the wrists, what we might be looking for is a little bit more hinge in the backswing, but a definite feeling of a release in the downswing, which will actually let the club head fall down to the ground and release through. And that's really what we're looking for, not only in the pictures, but also in your feeling of the club going down and skimming across the ground and taking the ball with it. I'm hoping that when you do this, you will also start to get a lot more feeling for what your hands are doing, which is definitely going to help you when you start hitting longer putts, which is obviously totally dependent on your ability to gauge the distance. I bet with you, if you keep your wrist stiff and roll a ball and then relax your wrist and roll a ball, you'll be better at judging the distance that you roll the ball with a loose wrist. The logic says stiffen it up, it's more reliable. But nature says you have more feeling in your hands than in your shoulders. And that is what's going to not only help, but vastly improve your putting. Again, I don't necessarily say go back to Bobby Jones and flip your wrist backwards and forwards, although it worked for him and he was known as one of the best putters on the planet in his day. However, probably the Crenshaw position, where you can see quite a bit of hinging in the backswing, but limited hinging in the follow-through, is probably the best one. But Ben would always talk about releasing the head through the ball. That was his feeling. But obviously with this relatively bent down lead wrist, this ulnar deviation in the wrist, his wrist mechanically could release without going into too much extension afterwards. As ever, what I'm trying to do is just think a little bit outside the box. Try not to kind of tell you you've got to do it this way, it's the only way to succeed, and maybe learn a little bit from history, because there were some very, very good golfers back in the day playing with far less or worse putters and far worse balls and far worse greens, and they were still holing lots and lots of putts. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, maybe even subscribe. Until the next time, goodbye.